Hey, this is Andy here with Libertarian Revolution. And today, I'd like to talk to you about a subject that's probably going to be my most controversial video so far, and that is the case for more restrictions on voting. Now, I'm sure that some people out there are going to freak out over this, like, oh my God, this guy wants to take away people's right to vote. Oh, that's so terrible. Oh, that's really horrible. Here's my response to that. And that is that democracy and freedom are not the same thing. There's a quote which is attributed to Benjamin Franklin that goes something along the lines of, democracy is two wolves and a sheep, or two wolves and a lamb, voting on what's for dinner. So in other words, in a pure democracy, 51% of the people can vote away the rights of the remaining 49%. So democracy and freedom are not necessarily the same thing. Now, some people out there might say, well, I'm an anarchist, so I don't believe in voting at all. Well, you know something? Even if we had an anarcho-capitalist society, there could still be voluntary election or voluntary associations that could have elections. And say, for instance, you lived in a condominium complex. Should somebody who, say, doesn't live in the condominium complex, or maybe they live in the condominium complex but they don't actually own the condominium, they're just renting or just visiting, should that person be able to vote in the election, or should just be limited to people who actually own units in the condominium complex? Well, I guess that would be a decision up to the condominium complex to decide. But if I were part of it, I would say that only people who own units in the condominium complex should be able to vote in the condominium association elections. Also, here's another example with jury trials. So any court case that involves a jury will eliminate people from being jurors if they have a conflict of interest in the case. That is, if they are a family member or friend or business associate of somebody who's a party to the case, they will be disqualified from serving on the jury, and rightfully so. Why? Because they have a conflict of interest in the outcome of the case. And I'll tell you what, I bet you anybody out there who freaks out because I'm suggesting that certain categories of people should not be able to vote or donate to political campaigns, then I bet you if you took these same people and you put them in a court case that had a jury trial, and they knew that there was a juror on the jury panel who had a conflict of interest with the other party from them in the lawsuit, I bet you that they would freak out and they would call for that juror with the conflict of interest to be removed from the jury, and rightfully so. Well, it's basically the same concept with what I'm suggesting about more restrictions on voting. Anyway, I would like to see, or there ought to be, a provision that says that anyone who receives money or other handouts from the state should not be able to vote. So that would mean, or donate to political campaigns. So that would include government employees, government contractors, people receiving government grants, welfare recipients. And I'm not just talking about the poor people on welfare. I'm also talking about corporate welfare recipients. Now, would I include, say, some low-level employee at, let's say, Walmart, a cart guy or the cashier or maybe a low-level manager or the person who stocks the shelves? Well, I don't know, maybe, but maybe not. But at the very least, I think the people calling the shots at the corporation, and that is the corporate, the board of directors and CEOs, those people, who are the ones who basically, in many cases, actually lobby for government handouts, they should be barred from voting or donating to political campaigns. Now, and then I would also even include people receiving government pensions should not be able to vote or donate on political campaigns. Now, I understand this is probably this probably offends some people, and they're thinking, well, hey, I get a government pension. You're saying I shouldn't be able to vote? Well, sorry, but I guess I am. So now here's why. Okay, because if you're receiving money or other forms of handouts from the state, and I'm not talking about there's kind of like a general welfare and specific welfare. So general welfare is something that the entire public has access to, like let's say a road or a sidewalk or something, or a public park or a public library, the actual use of the library, that anybody can walk in and pull a book off a shelf and start reading, or use a computer or check out a book or whatever. I'm talking about like specific welfare, specific handouts, like you are getting food stamps, you are getting a WIC check or something, you are getting, SSI benefits. Those would be forms of specific welfare, or your corporation is getting some kind of handout from the state. You're getting land handed to you that was seized through eminent domain and then transferred over to your corporation because some politician thought it would generate more tax revenue, or because you made campaign contributions to somebody. So I'm talking about people who basically earn in full or in part their living from the state, from the taxpayers, feeding from the government trough, sucking from the government's nipple. Okay, so these people all have a vested interest in their program, whatever program they're benefiting from, continuing and even expanding. So they have an incentive to vote for politicians, or if they're in a place that has a ballot initiative or referendum on the ballot, that will expand their program, that will put more money from the taxpayers in their pockets. Okay? And so I don't think it's really that unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say that these people should not be able to vote or donate to political campaigns. Now just imagine if we had a political climate where there was no political power from, let's say, the police union, the prison guard union, the government school teachers union, the military industrial complex, or any other bankers, and then these people getting these bailouts, billions of dollars. Imagine if none of these people could vote or donate to political campaigns. Okay? This would decimate the fundraising and the voter base of the Democratic Party and also the Republican Party, because they're taking money from a lot of these same groups that feed out of the public trough. Now, not 100% of the same groups, but a lot of the same groups that both of these major parties are benefiting from campaign contributions as well as votes. So just imagine if you took that away. You think in an environment like that libertarian and constitutionalist type people would stand a much better chance of getting elected? I do. And so basically right now we have perverse incentives in place. So what I'm talking about is getting rid of the perverse incentive of people who, derive their living or in full or in part from the taxpayers. Okay, from being able to, because the whole thing with government is supposed to be the servant, not the master. And so now let me ask you this: would you go to a restaurant where the wait staff could vote on how much of a tip you had to leave? don't you think, and say you couldn't leave the restaurant until they voted on how much of a tip you were going to leave, and if you didn't leave enough, they could grab you and just, take the money out of your wallet. Would you go to a restaurant like that? And do you think that the service at a restaurant like that would be very good? I don't think so. I wouldn't want to eat there, and I don't think the service would be very good. Well, that's basically what we have from government. Okay? So we have people who are supposed to be public servants influencing the political process to a very large degree. Actually, I would say dominating the political process, influencing the outcome of elections, and that goes against the detriment of everyone else who is not feeding at the public trough. Okay? So another restriction I'd like to see is that there ought to be a test given on the Constitution before people can vote. And only people who pass the test can vote. Now, somebody say, oh, well, the test can be biased or something. Okay, what I would do is the wording of it would be that the questions on the test can only be on what the Constitution actually says. Okay, so what does the Second Amendment say? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, and that doesn't mean that that it meant the National Guard or something, or only the police and military can have guns. No, the well-regulated militia meant every free man who can bear arms. And if you go back and you read, what the founding fathers said, it's blatantly apparent that they advocated for the individual right to keep and bear arms. So, and anybody who says otherwise is a liar, okay, or ignorant. And if they've actually done any homework on it and they're still saying that, then they're a liar, okay? Anyway, what does the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution say? Well, the Fourth Amendment says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, papers, and effects shall not be violated, and no warrants shall be issued except upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. I think I got that right. Maybe I got it slightly off, but that if I'm off, I'm not off by much. Okay. So now, do I have the whole Constitution memorized? No, I don't. Okay. Sometimes I have to go look things up. But you know something? If I don't know something, I'm not afraid to go look it up. Okay. And if a test was given on the Constitution, I think I would probably pass it. But I'm not too proud to go study beforehand and maybe brush up on something if I'm lacking in some area. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to say that if you're going to go vote, then you should know how the government is supposed to operate, and the government is supposed to operate within the bounds of the Constitution. And so is it really unreasonable to say that, before people are able to walk into the polling booth and, vote for who's going to be an elected representative or vote on a ballot question, that they should actually know and understand what the Constitution says? Is this really such a radical thing? I mean, I think part of the problem right now is we have lots of people walking in and voting who have no idea what the Constitution says, or they have some really twisted idea of what the Constitution says. And really, these people have no business voting. Okay, they really don't. And I think that if those people were eliminated from voting, from being able to vote, the people who they're too lazy, or maybe they're too stupid. But I think a lot of people, it's not even that they're too stupid. I think they're just too lazy. And unfortunately, the government school system does a very lousy job in teaching people, about the Constitution, as well as the Declaration of Independence, which is supposed to be the philosophical grounds of what this country was, supposed to be based on, And actually, while you're at it, have a test on the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution before you can vote. Anyway, moving onwards, another group that should be prohibited from voting or donating to political campaigns are people who have, and from serving in political office, should be people who are dual citizens. If you're a citizen of another country at the same time as you're a citizen of this country, then you really shouldn't be voting or donating to political campaigns or holding political office. And in fact, I would like to see an elimination of foreign lobbyists. I mean, the U.S. government is supposedly supposed to serve the interests of the American people, not of some foreign government. So there really shouldn't be any foreign lobbyists, and there shouldn't be any dual citizens holding political office or influencing the political process. And another reform, or another thing I think should be put in place, is and this is gonna, I'm sure this whole video is going to cause controversy with people, but another one some people aren't going to like is I would eliminate the current interpretation, or I would say a misinterpretation of birthright citizenship. That, in other words, if your parents are not American citizens, but you were born on U.S. soil, then you should not be a citizen either. In other words, you should only be an American citizen if your parents are American citizens. Okay? If your parents are not American citizens, you should not automatically be regarded as an American citizen. Now, I'm sure immigration policy is a hotly contested issue among libertarians, and I know there's some libertarians out there probably freaking out, and they're going to say, "Oh, well, we should just, open borders and mass, unlimited, unrestricted immigration, no questions asked, should be the de facto libertarian policy." I disagree with that. I actually do not think it's a libertarian policy, because libertarianism is about not about being socially liberal or being a libertine. It's about property rights and the non-aggression principle, and that if we lived in an anarcho-capitalist society, all property would be private property, and it would be the discretion of the private property owners as to who could come on what property and on what terms. Okay. And so I don't think any sane property owner is going to open up their property to just have unlimited numbers of people come on and just squat on their property and just do whatever. If they did, they're going to quickly destroy the value of their property. But I don't think that's something that most property owners, or maybe any property owner, would actually do in reality. So we don't live in a pure libertarian society. We live in a society that has a state, as does everyone else in the world, and the state is acting as a property manager. But anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, and as it stands right now, we have to operate within the world as it is, and I don't think it's unreasonable to say, and in fact, the original intention of birthright citizenship was that it applied to people who were whose parents were citizens. And when the 14th Amendment was passed, which it granted citizenship to the former slaves, the former black slaves were granted American citizenship under the 14th Amendment, but it did not apply to anyone else. And in fact, it wasn't until decades later that American Indians were granted American citizenship. American Indians were considered to be citizens of their tribe, not citizens of the United States of America. Now, before anyone out there gets on my case for using the term citizen, I'm an anarcho-capitalist at heart, and I don't think that citizens or states are legitimate. So if anybody wants to jump down my throat with that argument and say, "Oh, there's no such thing as a citizen," well, I kind of agree with you in theory or in philosophically. philosophically, yeah, I agree. But again, once again, we have to operate within the world as it is right now. And that's just the reality that we're living in. You know, government exists, government police exists, elections exist, government welfare programs exist. That's the world that we're living in. Okay, we don't live in, you know, the far off fantasy, you know, libertarian, anarcho-capitalist society, the libertopia, as some people have called it. Okay, where I'm basically what I'm talking about is kind of like, how do we operate in the world as it exists right now? We're not going to abolish elections anytime soon. We're not going to abolish the state anytime soon. We're not going to privatize everything or get rid of the welfare state. None of these things are realistically on the table right now. Okay, so I'm talking about operating within the world as it exists right now. Okay, so anyway, I don't think it's really unreasonable to say that people whose parents are not, who are born in this country but whose parents are not American citizens, should not be automatically regarded as American citizens. And in fact, like I said, that's how the original interpretation of birthright citizenship, that's the way it was for a long time. So anyway, I don't think that these. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, these people, there shouldn't be a path for them to become American citizens. Yeah, I think there should be. Now, I would like to see the citizenship standards increased. And I really don't like the welfare status migration that's been happening for the last several decades. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that there should be any immigrants, or that there should be no way for people to become American citizens. Yeah, I favor a selective immigration policy that would, you know, attract productive, freedom-loving people into the country, but would, you know, turn away or discourage people who are hostile to freedom, people who hold, you know, Marxist or theocratic ideologies, or who are, you know, maybe non-ideological welfare seekers or criminals from coming into the country, and also communicable disease carriers from coming into the country. You know, so anyway, I think that if these provisions that I've just talked about in this video were all in place, I think that we would have a much freer and more prosperous society right now. So anyway, you know, if you agree with me or disagree with me, let me know in the comments section below, and hopefully we can get a discussion going about this. And if you like this video, or if you think I had anything interesting to say, certainly feel free to pass the video around. And I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about my proposal for more restrictions on voting or anything else. So until next time.